Greetings, everyone. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you're joining us today. My name is Khaira Noor from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm the founding director, Sports Legal, and the chairperson of the East African Sports Law Committee. We are proud to host you all today on this timely topic and discussion on how to build a sports law practice in East Africa. We are honored here today to have Mr. Elvis Majani, an ad hoc judge on the disciplinary committee at Kenya Basketball Federation in Kenya, who is yet to join us. Hopefully he'll be here with us soon. Mr. Moses Mwase, a partner at Legal Mark Advocates Uganda, and Mr. Peter Mshikilwa, managing partner at Blue Strategic Consult Services from Tanzania. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope we'll be able to deliver on the topic and be able to leave this session with the right information on this subject. If I can allow 2 minutes for each panelist to introduce themselves and then what they do in their respective roles. And if we can start with Mr. Peter. So I'll move according to the way you appear on my screen. So obviously now there are only two of you. So we'll start with Mr. Peter, and then Moses can follow. Kindly go ahead and introduce yourself, please, and tell us what you do. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. My name it has been introduced. I'm Peter Mshikilwa, an advocate of High Court of Tanzania and Zanzibar. And currently, I'm the managing director of Blue Strategic Consult Services, which specifically deal with sports laws, including athlete representation, anti-doping, and the like. I'm the alumni of ISD, where I graduated with honors in masters in international sports law, and currently as on board with this niche sector. And in fact, I think I'm the only Tanzanian practicing sports as sports per se. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Peter. I was actually mentioning to him that I actually didn't know any sports players from Tanzania, so it's good to have you represent. Mr. Moses, kindly introduce yourself and tell the audience what you do.
Thank you, Kairan. Thank you for having me. My name is Moses Mwase. I am currently a partner at Legal Mark Advocates. Legal Mark Advocates is one of the leading law firms in Kampala. It's been around. We will be celebrating our 20th year anniversary this year. I have joined the law firm effective 1st of January this year as a partner. My previous stints were with government, where I have served for a number of years. I'm an alumni of ISD School of Business and Law in Madrid, Spain. I'm also currently on the International Executive Masters course in Olympic Sports Management, which is conducted by the International Olympic Committee. We're doing this under the auspices of the University of Ottawa. But I'm also a sports administrator. I'm currently the second vice president of the Uganda Olympic Committee. I've also served in different capacities before I became second vice president as the head of the legal commission of the Uganda Olympic Committee, which also doubles as the Commonwealth Games Association. I also am a president of a federation here in Uganda. I'm the president of the Uganda Swimming Federation, but I also do a bit of work, legal work, with the International Federation, formerly known as FINA, which is now called World Aquatics. I've served on different committees, but I've joined the main fray of sports law, which I'm complementing with my other practices. So I'm glad to be here to share my experience and what we are doing to develop this area of sport. So thank you for having me, Kyran, and I'm glad to meet with you, Peter, and other colleagues on the call.
Yes, thank you, Moses, for that introduction. I must say, very decorated CV that you have. And I mean, it's interesting to note that Mr. Elvis, if I'm not wrong, he's also an alumni of EastDay. So that's a very interesting point to note for this panel. Maybe just to start off, and this might be an unpopular opinion. They say there's no such thing as sports law, as at least not as an actual practice area. Can Mr. Moses, maybe if we start with you, kindly and briefly define for us sports law, and how does law then get applied in the sports world, in your opinion and from your experience?
Kyran, you're very right. The jury is still out on whether there is such a thing as sports law. One school of thought thinks that we shouldn't have a distinctive a branch of law that is dedicated to sports, because the thinking is that if you borrow from many other schools of other law branches, then you cannot call yourself a distinctive branch for that matter. Sports law is a collection of branches, from contract, from tort, copyrights and intellectual property, which then enable practitioners to come up with what is called sports law. But my view, I think, is different. I think I agree with the view that sports law is a distinct branch, because sports, being what it is a standalone aspect, which has required that the law develops and revolves around what athletes, athlete support personnel, and professionals in that respect to sort of advance. Much as there should be aspects that are similar, that are nuanced in the sense that they can be used in other areas of practice, like maybe labor relations, employment, and the like. I think it's very true to say that sports law is a distinct branch, and I think this should explain why there has been tremendous growth in the practice area, in the area of dispute resolution, and this concentration and development of those practice areas is what really confirms that it's a distinct area of practice. And I think the conduct around specific things relating to sport also confirm the unique nature. I can give an example of a dispute resolution, which I think all of us are familiar with. The increasing reluctance of having sports disputes resolved using our court structure is based on the fact that sport is unique. It has its own unique issues that have to be addressed. It is time-based. If you have a competition starting in 2 weeks, I don't think that you can subject yourself to our court process, which is bedeviled by very many challenges. So that's my view. I'd like to agree that it's a distinct area of practice, but I can understand why the opinions are divided.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Moses. Maybe Mr. Peter would like to add on to that before we move to the next point.
Yeah, for me, I concur with Moses because of the evolving factors around it, and being distinct, we can even trace from the time of athletes. As you understand, most of sports law is mainly concentrated on talents. So given the fact that talent lasts, it should have to be distinct, irrespective of other sorts. So for me, I concur with Moses that is distinct from other branches of sport.
Thank you. And since we're still on this point, Mr. Moses, what would you say is the most prevalent issues or area that you're faced with in your day-to-day practice in sports law?
I'm sorry, Kyran, can you come again on that question?
No, I was just asking, since we're still on this point, what would you say is the most prevalent issue aspects that you're faced with in your day-to-day practice in sports law?
That is a very loaded question. Well, right now in Uganda, I think one of the major things that we are having to deal with, first of all, is we're dealing with unethical practices in sports. There are concerns about cheating, sports betting, but there's also a development, there are areas of development that are of concern for us as practitioners or developing practitioners. The fact that globalization and its expansion impacts how we behave also has affected many things. Technology and the digital platforms are also something that are impacting how we behave. So apart from the specific practice areas, those are some specific things, in my view, that have been. The sports industry is now a global affair. It's not a matter for just Tanzania or Kenya or Rwanda or just the region. What happens in Chengdu is something that resonates across the globe. We have the ongoing university games. I think all of you will relate to a story that has been trending about an athlete that was entered, but who was not eligible. And of course, there are ramifications on the federation heads. Government got involved. And I think for those of you who've been following the story, you know where that has led. Which takes me to the other point. The other aspect of concern is the fact that governments have woken up to the realization that sports is big business. And that's why we have seen an increase in the regulation and the reduction of that space that saw a lot of freedom with which sports actors were acting. So the fact that we now have laws that continuously get passed, get enacted by governments is also something of concern, because those laws now dictate how we should behave. And of course, that also brings into very, very sharp focus the principle of sport autonomy. I hope at some point we'll have a conversation on how the space and how governments are behaving impacts on that very crucial principle with respect to sport.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that detailed answer, Mr. Moses. Coming to you, Mr. Peter, how do you become a sports lawyer? Maybe given your background, given your journey into this sector, what would you say impacted you, or how did you end up into this field, and what's happening in Tanzania? What would you say? I mean, if I'm to give you the same question Mr. Moses just answered, what are you faced with? What do you do on your day-to-day practice as a sports lawyer in Tanzania?
Yeah, from my experience, you know, we have gone into different stages in Tanzania, where for the past 5 years, our league were typical amateur. There were not that much profession. Now with the drastic, with the changes, from past 5 years, where we have seen a lot of sponsorship or endorsement coming in, and we have seen a lot of profession now from different angles, including East Africa and the rest of Africa coming in. It has now necessitated a room for sports lawyer to practice. And giving my experience, because in the past I was a basketball player, and actually it ended up as an amateur because I could not go beyond from what I have been playing. So sports has been my passion, and it has been my core, and it has necessitated me to further my studies, at least to have a deep understanding on sports, and basically with the local and the international sports organization. So for now, because of the influx of people coming in, profession coming in, there have been some gaps in terms of the contract between players and the clubs. And I think if you are aware, we have been a lot of disputes concerning contract. As you understand, the sports is typically distinct, even the contract themselves. Sometimes you find a club having a contract with a player. If you go to the terms and the basic of the contract, you really understand that it is typically a lease contract, but it has been changed. And maybe the heading, but the rest of the terms are typically maybe on land contracts and whatever, conveyancing and whatever. So it has brought us to a situation where we face a lot of dispute, basically internally, and sometimes to players and the club, and sometimes club and the players. But also with the influx of sponsorship endorsement, it has also necessitated to have a clear and a deep understanding on how do we deal with sports endorsement. So for now, what we face, basically, as I told you, as I've mentioned before, our league is now, I think it is now number 5 in Africa. So a lot of people who are coming in, and a lot of sports stakeholders who are coming in. But the problem is, as I mentioned before, we have few legal experts who specifically are dedicated to sports. So it has, in fact, it is an opportunity to other lawyers who are coming, but it has also narrowed down the sports development in Tanzania. So in most cases, what I can say in a nutshell, the main issue which we now deal day to day is the contract issues and the sports athlete representation.
Thank you for that, Mr. Peter. And as we go to the next question, how does then a legal profession or an entity then develop or build a career or practice in sports law? From what you've just explained to us, how do you start out? How do you establish yourself in the field, and for you to be recognized to be here today, be called a sports lawyer? How do you start? How do you build that from the ground up?
Yeah, I think the first and the foremost is to develop a deep understanding on sports law. As you understand, sports keep on changing, so one need to develop a deep understanding on sports law. both locally and internationally. But
Yeah.
on the other side, it is also one need also to consider to specialize. You know, sports is wide. There are some areas. If you want to harness and be a good sports lawyer, to my opinion, one needed to consider specialization. If it is athlete representation, if it is the issue of anti-doping, if it's the issue of contract, if it's the issue of intellectual property. So for me, that could also be one of the area or issues which one need to consider. But the other issue which one need also to consider is to join different sports organizations. As you understand, we have different sports organizations in the world. We have regional and some are international. So it is, in my opinion, if you are left out of this organization, you won't get into details on how to go about the sports industry. But one also needed to consider or to look on the sports industry trend. As you understand, I'm sorry to say that before past 10 years, the Kenyan league was a bit stronger compared to Tanzania in terms of sports. I mean, in terms of sponsorship endorsement, in terms of TV rights. Abruptly in the past 3 years, 5 years, it is slowed down. And now, as we speak, we are leading in Eastern Africa. But as you understand, you need also to go into details on the industry trend, and that will also give you a good room now to become or to practice as a sports lawyer. But in most cases, I'm also, as Moses has pointed out, we need also to further our education. For me, if I could have stand as I am before 5 years, could be the same as a lawyer practicing sports, but not in a well-informed manner. So the other aspect, one also need to further some studies, and I am honored to be on board with my alumni. We have different institutions which offers. It is unfortunate that in our region we don't have specific institution which offer sports law. But one need also to further some studies. Maybe from there, Moses can chip in.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to turn to you, Mr. Moses. What is your opinion, or what advice can you give in terms of how to build a sports law career, or even as a sports lawyer individually, or even as a legal practice in a law firm?
Well, first of all, Peter has exhausted all the points. I can maybe add one or two. It was very articulate. I have given a couple of talks on sports law, and I think my emphasis has been, first of all, before anybody gets into a business or an engagement, you should have an understanding or an appreciation of what you're getting into. And I think that's a principle for just about everything. It's inadvisable for anybody to get into an activity or a business that they know nothing about. So like Peter rightly puts it, it's important for lawyers to develop an interest, to have a deeper understanding of what sports is about. Sport is such a big, worldwide industry that if people get into it without appreciating what it really has to offer, I think they will shortchange themselves. You have professional sports, you have amateur sports, you have big leagues, you have issues of sports medicine, you have issues of intellectual property, image rights, fan engagements, infrastructure. You have issues of regulations, policy and regulation. So there is a lot of things. And I think the very first question you asked on whether this is a distinct area of practice really emphasizes that indeed it is. So I think lawyers, the first thing to do, as Peter stated, is to understand what you're getting into. Then having done that, you will be able to see the opportunities that are available. I think Peter has mentioned several opportunities, but from a viewpoint of sports law firms usually specializing in sports law provide services to clients in the sports industry. And you see, as a practitioner, you can get to handle various legal matters such as contract negotiations, intellectual property issues. Peter mentioned those. You have to deal with sponsorships. National federations and athletes have got to contend with sponsorship issues, regulatory compliance. In Uganda, the example I gave, we have a new law that is coming. It will require all national federations to organize in a different way, first of all, to register afresh, to change their constitutive documents, their statutes, to address a couple of compliance issues. So there's a bit of work to do. And as usual, when you are dealing with sports issues, they are dispute resolution issues. Athletes are usually unhappy about selection policies. Federations have got to address issues of employment-related issues. So there's a number of areas of focus. But I don't think that this is limited to only sports law firms. We can also encourage in-house counsel. Sports organizations, professional sports teams, and including sports leagues often employ in-house legal counsel who also handle a wide range of legal matters. And I think I need not repeat those. So the opportunities are many, but the beginning point is to understand the industry. Having understood the industry and the issues that pertain to it, then you equip yourself. Be knowledgeable, be hungry to learn, but also attach yourself to people that know what they're doing. Often, many people want to grow up in the dark or to sail alone, and that often makes people drift across the sea, which is not very helpful. So you can find your feet, but it's easier also to attach yourself to practitioners that have done it. We know many firms that are practicing in Africa, and I think some of the destinations include South Africa, in Cairo, and some in West Africa. For East Africa here, I think the industry is relatively young. We're growing, so we need to also ensure that we are following after very good practice. We attach ourselves to people that are doing it right, so that we don't repeat the same mistakes they made.
Yeah. Thank you for that detailed answer, Mr. Moses. And maybe you mentioned something interesting. You're saying Uganda has recently come up or is coming up with a law that will require some sort of reform or regulatory implications. From that, would you then say our legal or governance system in East Africa, unfortunately, we don't have someone from Kenya who could give us that point of view. What needs to be done to build that foundational structure towards development of this sector? Any one of you can take that up. I see
Peter, you want to go first?
By my vice chair, Mr. Munabi Philip. Maybe he could also interject at any point. But go ahead, Mr. Moses.
Well, thank you, Kyran. First of all, there has been, like I said, the region has been a little bit slow in legal and policy framework development. For a long time, I know that in Tanzania and Kenya and Uganda and maybe Rwanda and other East African countries, for a long time, there hasn't been a clear policy on sports, including an enabling law. In Uganda, our law is pre-colonial or slightly after independence. The current law we have, the National Council of Sports Act, is the only one that regulates sports. It was really dealing with amateur sports, and it has not changed since 1964. So you can imagine between now and then, when the law was passed, there's been lots of changes. In a nutshell, the governments have been very slow to take sports serious. But I think with the increasing prominence, with the patriotism that is shown by athletes, with the national pride that comes from accolades being won by international engagements, I think the governments have woken up to the need to have a clear policy framework and laws. So I think, first of all, my humble view is that we need to galvanize as sports actors to ensure that we continue guiding regulators and the government to ensure that we have progressive policies and laws that help the sports to develop. Like I said in the past, the tendency has been for government to over-regulate, and that has not served a good purpose. Obviously, there's been issues which are governance related, and so many national federations, and I've done a bit of work in Kenya and Rwanda, so I'm a little bit familiar with the Kenyan law and a little bit of what's happening in Rwanda. So, and I think we've seen how progressive Rwanda has been as far as infrastructure is concerned and as far as supporting sport is concerned. So my view is that we need, as sports actors, to galvanize our support, to come together and be able to guide government in ensuring that they put in place progressive policies and laws that are compliant with international requirements, which will not result in stifling sport, for a start.
Yeah, thank you. And we have an interesting comment here from Nancy Oko on this same point, which she's kindly pointed out that in Kenya, we have a Sports Act 2013, which regulates sports, but its application has been quite uncertain, which I have to agree on that. She also mentioned that the Sports Tribunal has made several judgments which have clarified a lot of gray areas. Thank you for that, Nancy. And I think we have the chairman of the Sports Tribunal in attendance today. So hopefully next time we can have him come on board and tell us what the Sports Tribunal has done so far and what, in his opinion, would be the next steps into building this the dispute resolution side of sports law. Maybe Mr. Peter, you would like to add on to what Mr. Moses said on that in terms of governance, regulation, policy framework of the East African landscape, or maybe in Tanzanian perspective.
Yeah, I think from what Moses has said, we did share the same experience. Going into details, our sports policy dated back 1976, and the sports law also dated 1974. So you can see how lagged behind we are. And in terms of lesson, I'm told with some, there are some amendments in the next session, parliamentary session, that they are going to repeal the sports law of 1976. And from my experience during my studies, I resorted to do a topic on sports dispute tribunal in Kenya, because I was in a comfort zone, because I understand the sports law of Kenya was enacted in 2013. Irrespective of the challenges the arbitration for the sports tribunal has, but at least it gives ideally it gives a move because it has started, irrespective of the how the laws and the regulation are, but at least it's a starting point. So in a nutshell, what I can in my opinion, sports law, for instance, as Moses has said, in Tanzania, it is the same experience in Uganda, because you can see if the policy dated back 1976, which was typically amateur, and in fact, the games were just played for political mileage or political arrangement. And on the side of the business, and as you understand from our historical background, it's quite different from Kenya and Uganda. We had a monoparty system, but also typical socialism state. So games, sports was typically for political mileage, and the aspect of business was left behind. But it has continued up to date. The forces now which has necessitated even this move, what we see now of changing, repealing the law, is now the influx of the sports business in Tanzania, which now has made the government to come and see and they reflect that this is a very big business, and in fact we need now to have a very good environment in terms of infrastructure, in terms of policy, in terms of legal framework that suit the business itself, but also the people, because we understand, for instance, for now, for instance, in our league, we have more than 200 professionals who are playing in our national league. So it has necessitated the transformation now of the sports policy and the legal framework to best suit the current situation.
Thank you, Mr. Peter. So for everyone who's put their questions in the Q&A, we have not ignored them. We'll get to you once we've finished, or rather, we finished with my questions to the panelists. Maybe now just another question to the panelists again. So record shows that major sporting talent is managed internationally. Would you then say this forms part of the problem in the growth and development of the sector? And how do we then identify and tap into these available opportunities for sports lawyers?
Aaron, can you repeat that question, please?
So I was saying records show that major sporting talent is managed internationally. Would you then say this forms part of the problem in the growth and development of the sector? And how do we then identify and tap into these available opportunities for sports lawyers or for lawyers in general?
Well, like I said, it's a global industry. And obviously at the highest level, the biggest talent will attract the biggest agents. But I do not think that that lawyers should start with wanting to attract the biggest talent. I think there's talent at the grassroots. It's often good to start small and then grow. And I think there's enough business for everybody. I don't know if someone has done a census of how many sports codes there are. I think I know about 100 sports codes. Of course, we know the biggest or the most prominent by ranking, football, then you have cricket. If you're in India, then you have basketball, then you have Major League Baseball. If you're in the US, then you have lawn tennis, volleyball. So there's many sports codes, and there's a lot of work to go around, particularly because all the athletes who start as amateur, who start very young, by the way, want to progress into being pros. So if you're talking really from a viewpoint of being an agent or helping those athletes to deal with their issues, they can be, you can start small. You don't need to deal with people that are in the professional ranks for starting. You can grow with the amateurs and you help them transition into the professional ranks. But also, of course, if you're also there, you can also tap into that. Football, as we know, has recently changed its regulatory, its regime for who can become an agent. You just have to do an exam now. You have to understand the terrain. And I think the other sports codes are also picking a leaf. So in my view, I think professionals need to start small. They need to understand that talent growth or development is an aspect that is developed while athletes are still developing. Of course, as I indicated in the past, at the highest level, there's a serious competition in terms of agents transferring and being able to represent athletes at the highest level. So that's really is at the talent aspect, but talent development alone is a deep subject, which I think is a subject of thesis. So that's my humble opinion, Kyran. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for that. Mr. Peter, would you like, sorry, Moses. So Mr. Peter, would you like to interject, maybe add on to that point, or we can move on to the next question?
I think Moses has exhausted. Maybe we can.
Thank you. We've had a few questions here. There's one that's quite long. Maybe we could start answering some of them as we move on. Michael Wisso says, in my view, sports is the most abused area of engagement right from FIFA level to local scene. I have a problem with the FIFA where they don't recognize national governments, where national government intervene in the running of sports. I think this is a whole other subject on third-party intervention, but then it says FIFA would prefer to protect the corrupt local sports administrators as opposed to support fair forensic investigation to expose the rot. Players not being paid by clubs, etc. In my opinion, Michael says, FIFA is encouraging impunity in sports management. Kenya's case stands a good example, though I stand to be corrected. Is there any development in law to address this chronic problem in the sports management? I don't know anyone who would like to answer that rather political question. Anyone who's courageous enough to take that up, please.
Well, I can attempt, and it's good to know that Mr. John Ohaga, our good friend, is on the call. I didn't know he was on the call. Yes. But I think in general terms, my understanding is that I think I've mentioned it in the past, Kyran. Sports has got its own governance. Excuse me. Sports has got its own tenets under which it's governed. And the leading tenet, first of all, is that it is to be, sport is to be autonomous. Now, sport autonomy is also the subject of many discussions. Autonomy really means that decision-making in sports disciplines should not be influenced, it should be these decisions by sports administrators should be made by themselves without the influence of any other parties, particularly government. So whenever there's a feeling that government is encroaching on that sport, then international federations, the International Olympic Committee, will be quick to sanction or exclude the participation of the affected federation. So that's the beginning principle. And I think the example we see that you cited really teeters very much on the concern that that this principle was being encroached upon. So that's the principle that cuts across, and I think the United Nations General Assembly has recognized that sport should be run in an autonomous fashion, but increasingly, where government provides public funds to run sport activities, there's an understanding that those funds must be accounted for. Some administrators have painted the picture that just because sport should be autonomous, questions should not be asked for accountability, and, you know, as far as good governance is concerned, which is not true. So there's a new phenomenon that has come in, which is called responsible autonomy, which the International Olympic Committee has also recognized. You're autonomous, but there's what's called responsible autonomy. And I think that's to recognize that while sport should, you know, make decisions on its own, administrators don't operate solo. They are not islands. They need the governments to guarantee the success of sports. And I think this is what we increasingly will see tested to ensure that this space is also protected. But for instance, the example I just gave of the athlete in Somalia, a federation took an athlete that was considered not to be eligible. And the next thing we saw, the minister was directing the Olympic Committee and the federation in charge to have the leader in charge suspended. So now this can be interpreted. Should the government direct the suspension of leadership in a sports federation? We have seen this happen in Nigeria. We've seen this happen in several countries. And obviously, federations have come up and suspended participation of the local federation. So in my view, I think we will need to understand what responsible autonomy is. So I wouldn't say really that FIFA encourages impunity. FIFA is an independent organization, and they run on the understanding that if there's interference in the work of the local federation, then they will move quickly to ensure that they protect that space. Thank you. Thank
you, Moses, for that. I think you raise a very important aspect of a general years-long argument when it comes to sports autonomy. And I'm of the view that absolute autonomy corrupts absolutely. So accountability is very important. And thank you for bringing up the responsible autonomy part. Nancy also says, I also think government should not be involved. For Kenya, I believe we should have moved the sports registrar to act. The Sports Act make provision for that. I'm not sure how practical that would have been, but yes, we do have this provision. Thank you, Nancy. And I'm seeing Geoffrey or Jock raising his hand persistently, so I don't know, would you like to be given a chance to speak, or do you have a question that you could raise for us in the Q&A section? Let us know. We have another interesting question here from Calvin. He's saying, please, what are the essential provisions or clauses that must be included in a sports contract? I think this is a bit more specific, but anyway, Peter, we could give you a chance to answer this.
Yeah. I think one need to understand there are two main clauses which need to be included, but as you understand, with their development, it has necessitated other clauses. But for my understanding, talking about football, one need to have a buyout clause, and one need also to have a release clause. These are the major clauses which will entail, in case, for instance, in buyout clauses, in the avenues where a player is wanted maybe by club B, and the duration of the contract maybe ends in next 2 years. So it should have to clear a state in case of ending that contract before the termination time. What should be the amount which should be remitted? Maybe it should be remitted to the club, but also with the release clause, one need also to understand at what avenues now the player will be released, maybe to club C or to club B. But in modern football contract, they have now come to a point where to have what we call economic rights. For instance, if a player is have a contract maybe by team B, and as you understand, we have some issues of image rights and whatever. Now, if it is within the scope of the club and the player, then one has to distinguish at what time now this image rights will be embedded directly to the player, and at what time this image rights might be shared with the player. As you know, image rights are personal rights, but sometimes with practice, one can agree. And I can give a good example. For instance, in Spain, Barcelona Football Club they have their unique clauses where they allow players to use their image rights. But going to other clubs should have to be 50-50. So to be precisely, to my understanding, the main and the major clauses which need to be incorporated in any football contract, as I said before, one is the release clause, and the other one is the buyout clauses. But as I said, with the development and with the behavior, sometimes the behavior of the players might also necessitated to incorporate other clauses. As you understand, there is if you can recall, during the transfer of Balotelli to an Italian player from Italy League to Liverpool, there was a clause specifically for behavior for Balotelli. So this is the modern now modern contract for players. Sometimes you might also embed in the behavior of the player, but also, as I said, with the economic rights. And basically economic rights sometimes was the cure for what we call TPOs. Moses would understand, the third party transfers, which was abolished. Now it has necessitated some of the rights to be shared or to be embedded directly to players. So for me, what I am opined, the two main contract, the two main clauses are the release clause and the buyout clause. But on the other side, as I told you, we have experience here in Tanzania where the contract is claimed like a conveyancing contract. You find what they do, they omit some of the words. If it was duration, if it was the issue of terms, when it goes to the issue of scope, now it becomes a problem because they have copy and paste. other contract. But in most cases, sports law allows the applicability of national laws in terms of labor laws. So one also needs to understand, to have a clear understanding on the labor laws of its locality, whether it is in Kenya, whether it is in Uganda. And there are, on most cases, because it is a local to international transfer, one need also to understand what a deep understanding on the international regulation, including FIFA regulation, on how now to organize and navigate on the provision which are specifically stipulated under the FIFA regulation. So for me, that's maybe Moses can chip in from there.
Yeah. And sorry, so will we still have you? There's a question here from Lloyd Arwa. He's saying, my question, do you think that the East Africa bid for the 2025 AFCON further the need for stronger sports legislation in the region?
No, in my opinion, they will beat it because, as you understand, we are Tanzania is one of the top 5, and we have seen some clubs from Tanzanian League excelling from CAF Champions League, and the environment also attracts the growing of the football. So for me, with Mosepe, if I could be sitting with him, we are ready in terms of infrastructure. I'm sure I've heard Kenyan, they are now in a good move. Recently, we had a Simba Day, and actually the guest of honor was our Madam President, and she firmly articulated that we are ready to host with our counterparts, the East African, Kenya and the Uganda. And he also acknowledged that we are constructing more than 3 stadiums, specifically to cater for me, what I see with the growing industry in East Africa, we are ready to host the AFCON.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for that. Okay, so one last question from my end before we continue to taking the questions from the audience is what
maybe
sorry?
Byron, maybe I should comment briefly before. I think Peter had wanted me to comment on the question he answered first.
Yeah.
Regarding a sports contract. I think he has exhausted it. But what I wanted to say is that these sports contracts are becoming standardized because agents and leagues have been at it for a while. The contracts are becoming standard. It's the way you go to negotiate a facility in a bank, a mortgage or something. The terms are, the language and the wording of the contract is becoming standardized. It allows room for areas that are specific to be negotiated on. But the rest of the things, because of what we are increasingly seeing, is really becoming a thing for standard practice. And I think Peter touched on many of those clauses that are becoming, that one needs to look out for. But I think another key clause that I'll mention regards performance bonuses. Performance bonuses lately have become something of issue. And this is a section that usually specifies the conditions under which an athlete or a coach can earn additional compensation based on specific performance milestones, such as achieving specific statistics or team achievements, etc. So these bonuses are becoming key. And lately with merchandising, I think this is also important. There are some athletes and coaches that are able to I think Peter elaborated this very well. I don't want to repeat his words. Maybe one last clause is one of injury and health. This usually addresses the athlete's health and medical considerations, including providing for medical examinations, treatment, and how injuries, once they occur, the athlete should be treated. I think we know many examples where you sign an athlete very expensively, and then they just cannot play because they're picking injury after injury. Yeah, but in a nutshell, contracts are becoming pretty standardized, allowing that people negotiate on specific things. Of course, we know some super athletes, quote unquote, the Messis of this world, the Ronaldos, who have been allowed to negotiate slightly more than their counterparts, and whose release clauses usually are a little bit more flexible. So again, while they're standard, there are some people who have turned out to have better negotiating power. Thank you. I thought I should say that before you move on to the next question.
Thank you, Moses, for your insightful additions. So basically, what would you say are the challenges or barriers to entry into sports law for, and I mean, in this case, African sports lawyers, specifically East Africa? I know you've mentioned that that education is one of them, and basically we still need to grow the industry so that we can all be able to have some, some application from our legal practice. But I mean, generally, what would you say are the main barriers to entry, or maybe something you've experienced as you're getting into sports law, and what do you think should be the solutions for that? We can start with Moses, and then Mr. Peter can take it up.
Well, I think the biggest handicap is, first of all, our economies have not been very supportive of sport. Sport has been largely amateur. We have very few sports codes across East Africa that have broken into the professional ranks. There are not many. You can count football in Kenya and Tanzania, well, football across the region, basketball, cricket, maybe a bit of golf. We have some professional golfers, not very many. And you could add maybe one or two rugby, I'm not too sure. So the first thing is that our economies have not, in a way, supported the rapid or the required level of professionalization of sport. Professional sport really means that you have got people that earn and live off sport. And that's why in the legal sector as well, you will find that lawyer X is a sports law practitioner, but it's not entirely sports law. It's not an entire sports law practice. We have very few such practices in East Africa. So we have people doing sports law practice, but they're still leaning towards the other areas of practice, which just really speaks to how our economies are developing. So in my humble view, the first thing that our economies have not revolved enough to support the quick professionalization of sport. That's number one. And maybe just to explain that point, I think if I could use example of these popular leagues, the Premiership, Serie A, maybe the Spanish La Liga, you see that those leagues are usually competing with our local leagues in terms of viewership, in terms of popularity, because their product is developed. The level of sport, the TV coverage, the professionalism and everything is so prominent that it has attracted fans from far and wide. So much so that people can name for you all the players in the Spanish, the Serie A, yet they can't explain the people who are playing the Tanzanian local league. So you can see that challenge. So I think we also need to first of all ensure that we promote the growth of our sport locally. It needs to be supported by the economy, and as professionals we can add to ensuring that we professionalize sport. I think I could start from there. Maybe Peter can contribute as I can find other. I think the other impediments we've talked about, really, Peter has mentioned them. We don't have a dedicated sports curriculum across all the East African nations that would enable professionals to develop. I think we have some courses in sports science here and there, but in as far as a balanced, up to standard curriculum, I think this is something also that is up for debate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Moses has exhausted, but what I can add, for me, because actually we don't have an institution which is specifically dedicated for sports, becomes a hiccup. But what I can see, to me, I'm opined that with the next 3 or 4 years to come, I think sports industry in East Africa will take the head. As what I can see from the experience, leave alone the private actors who have now chipped in to be part of this industry. I do understand Kenya had TV lights which were sponsored by DSTV, but the problem, leave alone because it has to do with politics with KFF and the reign of it, which is not part of our discussion. But from our experience in Tanzania, for instance, for the past 5 years, the Tanzania Football Federation signed a TV right contract worth for 10 years, worth 200 billion shillings, which is equivalent to almost I can say 10 million US dollars. So with time, because as I understand, in previous 5 years, we had a sponsor who could sponsor a whole league for 100,000 US dollars. So it is it's a bit progress. So to my understanding, as once has said, we still have to go, but I can see the right out of it, and the challenges might also be some of opportunity long run as we go with the sports practice.
Thank you, Peter, for that. We have a few questions targeting yourselves respectively. There's one, I believe this might have been answered by, they're saying, considering by Naisi, okay, the name is a bit tricky, Maureen Ene Mede, is saying, considering that most players' contracts allow unilateral termination by clubs, thus players are at a disadvantage. Do you think that buyout clauses should be made mandatory in player contracts? This is targeted to Mr. Peter, but Mr. Moses, you're also welcome to answer this. Peter, would you like to go first?
Come on again.
He's saying, considering that most players' contracts allow unilateral termination by clubs, thus players are at a disadvantage. Do you think that buyout clauses should be made mandatory in player contracts?
Yeah, as what we have said, maybe if I can recall from what I've said, because with the development of sports law, contracts have become standardized, and now because this is a two-way traffic, and in most cases we have also one of the case, the experience we have here. There was a player who was playing with one of the club here, and they actually unilaterally terminated the contract because there was a clause which gave him a room that for if a player wants to terminate, should have to limit and pay such kind of money. I think it was 100 million and 3 months salary. And because actually the contract had 2 years to lapse, the player went further and terminated the contract because the clauses which were in that contract allows him to terminate. Then the club had to refer this matter to the federation that the players breached the contract, and I can tell you that case, it was the president who had to intervene because there was a lot of dilly-dally within the Tanzania Federation itself, but also within the club itself. So for me, what I see, first and foremost, is one has to look on and to have a clear picture on the FIFA regulations, which specifically provide for such gaps. So for me, I will go for FIFA regulation. What does it entail and what does it stipulate? Because buyout clause and the release clause are typically for clubs, specific club, because a release clause for club A, which is in Kenya, might not reflect the same release clause for a club which is in Uganda. So for me, my opinion is to go and look and appreciate on the stipulation of the FIFA regulation on the transfer and the status of player. That is what we call a Bible, I can say in a wrong way, a Bible or a Quran. One has to reflect. One has to go back to FIFA regulation and see if whether all the rights or the responsibility of player are protected or are stipulated in the federation. So for me, if you ask me for clauses, I will tell you clauses differ in terms of club, in terms of environment, and in terms of the league. Yeah. I think I've answered him.
Yeah, I think you've answered that exhaustively. There's another one here on the Uganda sports bill that Mr. Mose mentioned earlier on. Seyange Leon is saying, are you particularly satisfied with the process of the Uganda sports bill, especially engagement with the national federations and their input? And what are your thoughts about the intended law? Does it work well for 50+ sports disciplines in Uganda?
Well, interesting question. There was an attempt, as much as practically possible, to involve national federations, consult them. At the Olympic Committee level, we were consulted, and also at a federation level, we were consulted. But I think for those who have been following, we had the challenge of a private member's bill, which coincided with the government bill. So we at some point we had a bit of a clash of bills. But yes, there was an attempt to ensure that we were involved. The process started with trying to have a sports policy in place, a national sports policy. But because of the pressure of the private members bill, I think the government decided to do away with having a revised policy in place, and they fast-tracked the bill. ordinarily you should have a policy which then follows the bill. So yes, the answer is yes. Government, under the circumstances, consulted. What I know is that people are never fully satisfied with consulting. They want to be consulted over and over and over again. But yeah, many people were given an opportunity to comment. But also when the matter went before the Parliament's committee, we were also invited to contribute, and they asked for written submissions. As the president of the Uganda Swimming Federation, I submitted on behalf of the team, which were actually very well appreciated by the Parliament committee. The law makes an attempt to address challenges. We quite haven't seen it come to pass because it awaits assent. But it really addresses, first of all, we lack uniformity in the registration and incorporation of national associations and federations in Uganda. And this has resulted in governance, administrative challenges, including the fact that many federations don't have legal personality, multiple reporting and regulatory regimes. So this new law intends to try and placate those challenges. We have seen a number of federations that are multiple come up, and we hope that this will not be the case if registration of all those federations is centralized. It also attempts to recognize the fact that sport is now professional. It also wants to regulate the management of all clubs and other sports facilities, and to ensure that the role of government is also clarified in supporting the development of sport. So I can't quite say that it will deal with all the issues because the law is not yet enacted. It's awaiting presidential assent. But like every law, we hope it will be tested. And if there are gaps, our legislators will be moved to make the appropriate changes. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Moses. As we near the end of our session, we have some. Mr. Munabi, the Vice Chair, would like to also add onto that question. I invite Mr. Munabi to come on video or to unmute himself, maybe just interject or add on to that before we move on.
Thank you, Chair. You'll allow me to answer without the video because I'm traveling. Chair, the question is how to attract clients.
No, hold on. Let me repeat that question for you. It's about the sports bill, the Uganda sports bill. The question was, he says, Ayub, or rather this was directed to Mr. Moses, but then you can still answer. He's saying, are you particularly satisfied with the process of the Uganda sports bill, especially engagement with the national federations and their input? And what are your thoughts about the intended law? Does it work for the 50+ sports discipline in Uganda?
Of course, I have my reservations, but about the process, I think it was well done. It's one of those, I think it was one of the most highly consulted bills because I personally submitted my views through the Uganda Law Society and also the Uganda Boxing Federation. At least they met the end of having stakeholders on board. Yes, I'll speak generally, being a private member bill. You cannot rule out that there are some reservations. However, like my senior and sports admin lecturer has said, Mr. Moses, it is a good way to go. It is good to see the new law come into force if it is assented to, because it captures a lot of things. A lot of the discussion that we have here is essentially captured under the new law. it doesn't bring out properly how the sports dispute mechanism, resolution mechanism will be, but it proposes, I think under clause 59, it proposes that we have a list of arbitrators that shall be put in place at all times to see that sports disputes are resolved. But then you find that I think there was a comment about it still in the comment section. We don't have so many people who are into sports arbitration per se here in Uganda. But then the good of it is that we have people who are experts into this field of the law. I know Moses as one of them. I know Don Rokare as being, I think they are the lead in this field. So as and when it comes, a mechanism should be devised to see that we have a proper sports dispute resolution mechanism. And that will be one of the key things, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Philip, for your contribution.
Maybe Kyran, just to add, one of the other things that members on the call should know is that the law also attempted to address issues of anti-doping. I think we've seen from yourselves in Kenya that you have got a well articulated anti-doping law. In Uganda, the attempt was to do the same, but we're aware that the government has been rationalizing existing government bodies. So there's sort of been a fear of creating new agencies, and yet good practice would demand that we have a self-sustaining, independent organization, National Anti-Doping Organization, the NATO. So the law attempted to capture these principles, and of course, this also is something that we're following closely to ensure that it does not offend the requirements of WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency. And I think that's an area that we also need to be very careful about while ensuring that whatever provisions are put in place, ensure that the body that has been proposed is independent, it makes decisions on its own, and it supports WADA's principles as far as anti-doping is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. We have some interesting, I would say also slightly controversial ones here. Samuel Tinyinondi saying, good afternoon and thanks for the presentation in this unique area of law. He has two questions. One is, are there policies to tackle the question of transgender related issues in the sports landscape in East Africa? And the second question was, what strides have been made in issues relating to sexual harassment in sports? Sexual harassment is rather rampant, and there are instances where sports officials have had knowledge about these complaints but have exhibited deliberate indifference in solving them. In my opinion, this would be a whole webinar on its own, but yeah, I welcome the panelists to answer that for now. Anyone
want to go first, or you want me to attempt?
Yeah,
first?
you can take the first one and then I'll give Mr. Peter the second one to answer.
Yeah, well, issues of gender in sports, I think we all know, like you rightly said, Kyran, this will be a whole webinar. First of all, our governments have taken positions as far as these gender issues are concerned. What I've established is that most of the times the governments might have a different position that is contrary to what the international community understands or agrees with. In Uganda, for instance, we are famous for having passed some laws recently that are very clear as far as these gender issues are concerned. And as we have observed, there is often a clash between the local laws an international, the international order as far as sport is concerned. But there's two aspects. The first issue of controversy or concern, which many people have been debating, is whether transgender athletes should be allowed to participate in that gender where they've transitioned to. I think we have seen a number of international federations that have come out very clearly. I think swimming was the first, I think athletics, then swimming, then recently cycling, and I think one more. So the point of contention is whether it is fair for transgender athletes to participate in that new gender, particularly the trans females rather, formerly man, and then you transition to a female. So it's a very wide and divisive subject. And like I said, whereas there's been an attempt by international federations to create a bit of space for those affected athletes, the general view has been that it would create unfairness for people who have not transitioned, who have been in the gender. So the debate is very big, and I think we would need to have a whole day to engage. My opinion is reserved, but I can tell you from swimming, the International Swimming Federation, World Aquatics, has taken a view that if an athlete has not transitioned by 12, they cannot participate, because the view is that they have got some advantages that would make the competition unfair. But in order to address, to provide for athletes that have transitioned already, there are plans to consider having, dedicated competitions where everybody can participate. And I think the same view has been taken by cycling, by athletics. I think athletics has been very controversial. You recall that this whole debate we've had with Caster Semenya, whether her natural abilities should be stifled by her, taking on depressants to reduce the relevant hormones. So what am I saying? I do not think that specific laws have been passed to guide. In Uganda, we don't have a specific law that touches on those aspects of, but we know that we have a national law that has been very clear as far as how we should handle these gender issues is concerned. International federations are the ones themselves that have come out to determine whether people with this in this gender space can participate or cannot participate. Thank you.
Thank you. So for the second one, I'll give it to Mr. Peter to tackle. What strides have been made in issues relating to sexual harassment in sports? Sexual harassment is rather rampant, and there are instances where sports officials have had knowledge about these complaints, but have exhibited deliberate indifference in solving them. What's your take on that, Mr. Peter?
Yeah, for me, what I can say, there have been a lot of initiatives and the legal framework in place. And recent, we have seen even the United Nations come chipping in. There have been some memorandum of understanding between, for instance, between FIFA and the United Nations and the Olympic, as I can recall. So it has, because it is an area which need a lot to be done. And for instance, if we trace back from our locality, it's something which was not taken care in the past, because most of the offenders sometimes were the leaders in sports federations, and no one could come out and speak. But for now, because most of federation are ascribed to international federation, that means they need to abide and they adhere to this code. So for me, what I can say with this international organization coming in, and I think this is the area also which we as sport lawyers, we can also foster, because as I understand, recent FIFA's, I mean, the United Nations had secured some funds to FIFA to sensitize and giving education on this issue. So, in a nutshell, what I can say, this is an area which need to be taken care in terms of legal framework, though we know there are some gaps. And recently we had a case here in Tanzania where a player who was participating, I think it was CECAFA tournament, who was abused. And there were stern measures from the government, but also from the federation. So it is a call, irrespective of the gaps in our legal framework. But I think because most of these federation are members for international federation, they have to adhere and abide. And in fact, they have to come public to stop or to come with measures to deter or to make sure that these acts do not prevail. That is what I can say for now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Peter, for that.
Maybe Kyran, just to complement Peter's good remarks.
Yeah.
What I'm aware of, first of all, is that issues of sexual abuse have attracted the highest attention in sports, the sports circles. I think we know of many examples, and this has also been impacted by this whole Me Too You movement that has been, we've been experiencing. We had some very interesting cases in the US where I think we all know the examples in gymnastics, where a coach was abusing athletes. Coaches were abusing athletes for many years, this particular coach, and several other disciplines. So there's been a major outcry to address these concerns. What I know is that because of this pressure, the International Olympic Committee has had to review its policies on safeguarding. Safeguarding right now is a big thing, and there's a requirement for all national Olympic committees to have in place policies on safeguarding. Basically, safeguarding addresses slightly more than just sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is a component of it, but the welfare of athletes, ensuring that their well-being, mindset, and all those things are taken care of, and that they are free from any form of abuse, particularly this sexual one, which has been a major problem, I think has been emphasized in these new safeguarding policies. So the International Olympic Committee has required that all of us in our NOCs with a tree code
And I've lost yeah.
Yeah, but that said, I think also our local laws, I don't know about you, Tanzania very well, but I think our local laws also have got aspects where sexual harassment at any place of work or in a place of engagement is frowned upon. In Uganda, I think we have a couple of laws and policies that address this specifically. So I thought I would compliment Mr. Mshikirwa's very good comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses, for that. I think, as is mentioned, safeguarding, especially sexual harassment in sport, is a big issue at the moment, and we've seen many cases, including some from Africa, particularly the Mali basketball case. So, yeah, I mean, for those who are interested to know what opportunities are there, this is one of the areas you could immerse yourself into, especially in the research and policy part. As we go the next, there's one interesting one that I was actually going to ask. Khalid Isa beat me to it. Is asking, what is your take on esports? Should it be governed by ordinary sports laws, or do you believe it will require specific legislation? I think maybe generally, again, this could be a whole session on its own, but then I don't know, is Moses or Peter would like to take this firstly, maybe to even define what esports is, and then answer that question.
Yeah, basically, maybe if I can put it in a simpler way, esports is gaming in a competitive manner. So far, we don't have a legal or regulatory framework which is specifically dedicated to esports. Some of with the inclusion of South Korea, Spain, and the German, who have enacted specifically laws on sports, but the rest have applied the existing laws, such as contract laws, IP, and there are also issues of immigration law, because sometimes you need a player attending the tournament in Uganda, and there is a citizen of Mali. In my take, for now, because there have been some initiatives from, we have seen establishment of organization which deal with or regulate the esports, including the World Esports Association, which deal with organization of tournament. And the current, there have been a massive development where the Olympic has now recognized, and I think it was last month, they had a conference in Singapore to incorporate esports as one of the sports in the Olympic. So there have been some initiative, but what I can say, there are a lot of opportunities, because as you understand, esports in terms of the way it is regulated, or in terms of how it is organized, because of that gap of not having a specific legal framework. That means when you talk about contract law, that will always be in place to protect the players, and if it is the tournament organizers. And when you talk about image rights, that will always be there to protect the game developers and the sponsors, companies who are within that competition. So for me, I see esports as it is, because it is global. So there are a lot of opportunities. Being a lawyer in Uganda, being a lawyer in Kenya, or being a lawyer in Tanzania, you can still navigate on esports. So the basics of all the branches of law which are applied all over are all the same. That's number one. But second, because esports attract young players. It's quite different from the other sports where you need to have a player from sports academy. you go with him along for maybe 4 years, 4, 5 years, 6 years. But for esports, you can have a player who is playing amateur, and they introduce him or she to a competition, whether it is regional, international, national, and then right away from entering in any sports competition, he now transforms from being an amateur player to a professional player. So in my take, there are a lot of opportunities because it is the industry which is evolving a lot of demands, and because it cut across different angles in terms of branches of law, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of sponsorship and the like. So to me, I find a lot of opportunities out of it, and what I can say at my last place, we lawyers, that is the field which we need to chip in as fast as we can. I've seen a lot of, because that was my specialization, and I've seen a lot of people not only getting rich, because this does not involve injuries. Sometimes there are some school of thoughts out of it. Some would resort it to addiction. But what I can say, addiction, if it is typically referred or regarded as competition, to my understand, even in football, someone might be addicted, but if at all in a amateur, one cannot come to draw a demarcation whether this is competition and this is not competition. So for me, my take is that is a field which we need to harness, and we need to move as fast as we can, because there are a lot of gaps, and as of now, I understand Philip and his colleague are working tirelessly to join the World Esport organization. I know Kenya is one of the members since then. Tanzania has never thought of it, but I'm pushing that agenda. Maybe by the end of this year, we might also join to this organization. That's all for me.
Thank you. Moses, would you like to add to that?
Well, Mr. Mshikirwa has extensively explained the complexities of esports, which I think I agree with. I think issues of regulation are really complex, particularly because the owners of the outfits are the game developers, and I think an attempt to regulate is mostly being taken at that level to deal with the game developers. All the game developers have got their own drama, for lack of a better word. But I think, like Peter has indicated, esport is right now something of focus to the International Olympic Committee. They are discussing on how and the possibility of its involvement into the Olympic program. And there's a recognition that it's very popular. It's easy to play. But of course, the challenges that come with it now are what remains to be addressed. The biggest concern is competitive integrity, ensuring that there's fair play, that you avoid cheating in this competition is crucial. It's important. And the need, of course, to implement a consistent anti-cheating measure across board is something that is going to remain challenging. When people are engaging virtually, they have at their disposal a number of things that can enable them to have unfair advantage. So I think that's one of the biggest concern, but it has worldwide reach, and the monies involved right now are equally growing. In some competitions, people win as much as $10 million US. So you can see that it is there's a view that it might replace some sports if those other traditional sports do not shape up. So if the issues of competitive integrity can be addressed rather, then I think we will see that esports are taken into the Olympic space as into the Olympic program. But I think Peter has very ably expressed and explained the concerns that come with esport. And of course, one major one is violence and the content. Some popular games contain violent or mature content that may not align very well, with our family or friendly image that, is associated with our sports. So that obviously also raises some concerns. And I think there's also a clear definition that we need to cross together. What is sport? If I'm engaging, in some competitive games on a computer or on a device, is that sport? So there's also a big school of thought that is questioning whether esport is sport. So the debate is on, but I think if we can address the issues of how to ably regulate esport, then I think that the questions will be clearly settled. Thank you.
Nancy Oko again raises a very interesting definition here. She says but the definition of sports is indicated to be any physical or mental activity. So I believe that would include, the likes of chess and esports as we're speaking. And then one of the problems that could be associated with esports could include cyberbullying and harassment online for especially female players or young players involved in the game. For interest of time, unfortunately, I'm seeing we have more questions on the Q&A section. Sorry,
maybe I can add for 1 minute.
On the aspect of esports, or do you want to tackle
on esports?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. From experience we have, for instance, in South Africa, where they have termed esport as mind sport, which is the same to chess. So as what Moses has said, the debate is still going on, and on how to esport is sport, or esport should be looked in the other way around. So I think she has raised on the issue of chess. In South Africa, they have made it clear that esport is regarded as mind sport, which is the same to chess. So it is because, as I said before, it is an evolving industry, which need also a lot to be upon. So the debate is still going on, and also, as I said before, we need to chip in, and I can see an opportunity out of it because the debate is on.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. So for Richard, Calvin, William, and Calvin, again, we're sorry, we might not be able to answer your questions today, but you can send them to our secretariat and maybe they can forward it to the panelists who can answer you privately. So as we wrap up and before we finish off, and for the panelists, just a final question to finish this very, very interesting and interactive session today is, what would you say makes a good sports lawyer? Obviously, on top of being a good lawyer first, but what would be your final takes? What would be your advice in general? Input for the young lawyers that we have, and of course we have some very experienced sports lawyers in the audience as well. Just put it out there. What would you give them as a parting shot for this session today? Moses can go first.
Thank you. Well, a good sports lawyer, I think, as I indicated, should be one, first of all, that is not only knowledgeable. The space is always revolving. There's always, like every other discipline of law, the law is always changing. The Court of Arbitration for Sport is always passing judgments that impact on the industry, but also, there's a growing jurisprudence that I think every sports lawyer must accustom themselves to. So it's important to keep up to speed with the progressions, with the developments in the space, but also to equip yourself with the knowledge that is required. That's the first thing: knowledge and being up to speed with what is growing is important. But lastly, also, I think a good sports lawyer should be one that is interested in sports. I don't think that it's enough to be in it for the money. Many people ask us, sports administrators, why we do what we do. I think it's the passion that usually drives us. I did amateur sport. I never did professional sport. I did amateur sport in cricket, in swimming, a bit of football, but it was strictly for the passion, for the love of it. I think the same applies for a sports lawyer. You need to be in love with sport. You need to follow trends. You need to know what's happening in the space, and then you can serve people effortlessly. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
I think Moses has exhausted, but what I can add, for a good sports lawyer, one need to be stay focused and be updated. As you understand, sports is a moving industry and it keeps on changing. But to cement what Moses has said, one needs to have passion, and that is the most crucial part. You might see me going to Tallinn, Uganda, for instance, on May, because I saw a video clip of these young players playing in a football pitch, which is not even, they have made their own football pitch. And they came to realize these were just marginalized children who were passionate in football. But I had to go and see, and maybe next 5 to 2 to 3 years, we might get some professional from the center which I visited. So passion is first and foremost crucial part of being a good sports lawyer. The rest, as what Moses has pointed out, get updated, deep understanding of sports law. And we should also nurture our young lawyers. The way we used to perceive sports, anyone could do sports, anyone could be a sport lawyer. But to my understanding, sports lawyer is a distinctive field, sports law field, law field, which need one to get updated each and every day. Regulations come and they are repealed in terms of tournament, in terms of time, in terms of movement. So one need to focus and stay updated. That is what I can say for now.
Yeah. Again, I think our time is up, but I would like to thank the panelists once again. Thank you so much for taking your time to come on this panel and share your knowledge, your experience and opinion on different aspects. And thank you to the panelists for, the audience for coming here today. I think it's an overwhelming number of people who've been here. We've gotten some interesting questions. I would also like, before we part, the East African Law Society, in collaboration with ALN and Sports Legal, are going to host an inaugural sports law workshop on the 11th of September from 2 to 4 at the ALN House in Westlands, Nairobi. So we would, I've posted the photo and the link to register for the session in the chat. So we would really like to have you, anyone in Nairobi or anyone who would like to travel to Nairobi on that date, to join us. And we look forward to having more of you there, more questions, and rather more interactive session on that day. Some of our panelists are going to be Mr. John Ohaga, Senior Counsel, Mr. Munabi Philip, who is in the panelist today, the Vice Chair, Ms. Ashta Muhammad Saleh, and Wafika Beg from South Africa, and Ms. Aisha Abdullah, the partner of ALN Africa, moderating the session. So thank you once again. Thank you so much for making this a very interesting discussion today, and for the overwhelming support that we've got from all of you. So that's it from me today, and good evening and goodbye.